slept through all of the history classes you took in school, you probably have a vague memory that in the summer of 1945, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. That was a truly world-altering event. It changed everything about history from that point forward. However, even if you were an ardent student of history, there's a simple question I'll bet you've never thought about. How did the atomic bomb get from the United States to Tinian Island in the South Pacific, where the B-29 that delivered it to Hiroshima took off? That's where the USS Indianapolis comes in, and the title of the speech refers to that ship. The Indianapolis was a big ship, what was called a heavy cruiser, just under 800 feet long, and it carried a crew of about 1,200 sailors. It took part in a lot of the major battles in World War II in the South Pacific, including the invasions of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. In early July of 1945, the ship got an order that struck most of the crew as odd. They were told they needed to sail to San Francisco immediately and unaccompanied. That was a dangerous thing to do back then because of the Japanese submarines in the Pacific. The ship got to San Francisco and sat there for a few days, and then late on the night of July 16th, 1945, a convoy pulled up to the dock. Several very large crates were loaded onto the ship, and about a dozen guys wearing military uniforms with no markings or insignias or name tags or anything got aboard the ship. Early the next morning, the ship set sail for Pearl Harbor to refuel. Nobody on the Indianapolis knew it, but about 8 hours before that convoy showed up on the dock, the very first nuclear device in human history had been detonated in the New Mexico desert. Since the bomb worked, then they knew they could load the working components for the first nuclear bomb that was going to be operational onto the ship to take them to the South Pacific. The Indianapolis reached Pearl Harbor, refueled, then set off across the South Pacific, and got to Tinian Island on the 26th of July. They unloaded the crates and the 12 mysterious men, and then the next morning took off for the island of Guam, where there was a U.S. Navy base. Nobody aboard the ship knew what had just happened because it was part of the Manhattan Project, top secret. On Guam, about a third of the crew left the ship, and new sailors came on. It was part of the normal rotation at the time. And then the ship was ordered to sail to Leyte Gulf, Philippines, across the Philippine Sea. About exactly halfway on that journey, just after midnight on July 30th, 1945, the ship was hit with 2 torpedoes from a Japanese submarine. It immediately began settling at the bow and took on an extreme list that prevented the lifeboats from being launched. Within about 10 minutes, it had capsized and sank. Roughly 300 of the crew had either been killed in the initial attack or were trapped below decks and went down with the ship. The other 900 sailors went into the water. Now they knew they were in trouble. These were experienced sailors who had just taken part in World War II. And they were especially in trouble because there were no lifeboats. About a third of them did not even have their life vests on because of the chaos of going down in the middle of the night. So the captain, Charles McVeigh, did his best to keep everybody in a group and hanging onto each other and hanging onto the debris that was in the water and so on. They believed that they were going to be rescued fairly soon because the ship's radio man had had time to send out a brief distress message before he had to leave the ship too. What nobody knew, though, was that the message was received by 3 other Navy ships. One of the ships had a captain who was drunk, and he apparently lost the message, threw it away, whatever. One of them had a commander who told his radio man not to write down any messages that didn't refer to their ship. And the third captain got the message, but he believed it was a Japanese trick designed to draw his ship into a trap, so he didn't act on it. So there was the crew adrift in the Pacific Ocean. At about the 2-day mark, lots of them started dying. It was very hot. This is August in the South Pacific. And some of them died of drowning, some of them died from drinking seawater because they got thirsty, some of them died of hypothermia at night. It gets cold in the tropics at night. People don't realize that. At about the 3-day mark, the sharks showed up. A school of tiger sharks were attracted to these sailors in the water. they began scavenging the sailors who had already died, but then they started attacking the stragglers who drifted away from the kind of the raft of crew that had been formed. Finally, after 4 days in the water, an American aircraft on a routine patrol flew overhead, and they happened to notice that there were sailors in the water. Incredibly, on Guam, everybody had assumed the Indianapolis had arrived in the Philippines because they didn't hear any different. In the Philippines, the guy who was supposed to keep track of the ships coming into the harbor realized it hadn't got there. He immediately wrote that down in a little notebook and then didn't do anything with the information. So nobody knew the ship was missing. And that's why the sailors were on the sea for 4 days. Eventually, American ships showed up. The sailors were rescued, but only about 300 of them came out of the water alive. So 600 died during those 4 days, 300 went down with the ship. It was the worst single ship disaster, loss of life disaster in the history of the U.S. Navy. That's true to this day. Now afterwards, the Navy realized that they had a problem because their own incompetence had caused this loss of life. They needed a scapegoat, and Captain McVeigh became that scapegoat. They court-martialed him for putting his ship at risk. There were 400 American ships that were lost in combat in World War II. He was the only captain who was court-martialed for losing his ship. After he was convicted in the little kangaroo court, Chester Nimitz, the fleet admiral of the Navy at that point, remitted his sentence. That's the Navy equivalent of a suspended sentence. Put him back on combat duty. He eventually retired in 1949 as a rear admiral. But by that time, the Navy had organized civilians into writing him Christmas cards every year and saying, you know, we're not having a Merry Christmas because you killed our son. That went on for the rest of his life. Finally, in 1968, when he was 70 years old, another raft of those cards had showed up. He went into his front yard and shot himself. In 2000, President Clinton signed an executive order vacating the conviction and ordering it removed from his permanent military record. That's undoubtedly the worst illustration of military justice in U.S. history. Now, what does this prove? Not much, other than that there are major historical events that can overshadow other events that are just as interesting and in some ways just as important. As Toastmaster.